Welcome everyone! I continue to take a look at the games of the great Bobby Fischer. This time I've gone for a less famous one, but it's a very exciting game in the Sicilian Najdorf. This was played in Havana in 1965 and he faced Georgi Tringov, who was a GM from Bulgaria. Tringov had white and he opened with e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, cd4, knight d4, and after knight to f6 and knight to c3, Fischer, as mentioned, chose his favorite Najdorf variation. This was his go-to defense against 1e4, and on this occasion he played one of the most critical variations, the so-called poisoned pawn variation. After bishop to g5, Fischer played e6, and after f4, standard move, white wants to go f5 or e5 at some point, the queen moved over to b6, targeting the b-pawn, which was of course undefended after bishop to g5. Fischer could be quite materialistic actually, so he's fully intending on taking that seemingly free pawn on b2. Black really needs to know his stuff though if he wants to go into that, because it can get quite complicated, hence the name poisoned pawn. Nevertheless, Fischer was quite successful in this variation. He only lost one single game playing this way, which was against Boris Spassky in their World Championship match. Now white can actually sidestep the pawn sacrifice with knight to b3, that's not a bad move. But if white wants the most out of the opening, he has to accept the challenge, and white did that with queen to d2, and Fischer grabbed the pawn. Rook to b1 driving away the queen. Queen to a3, only move. Now today one of the approved ways of playing is f5 to loosen up black's pawns, and after knight to c6, a trade on e6 and a trade on c6, black gets this trio of pawns in the center, and sometimes white even gives up the e-pawn in this position to really ruin black's pawn structure. Going back to the game, white played e5 right now, which was definitely a lot more common back then. Fischer traded and brought the knight back to d7. Here white developed the bishop to c4. He doesn't bother defending the e-pawn, because you can see something very serious could happen on the e6 square if black isn't careful. If black simply takes that pawn, that's a big mistake. Now white has a very typical Sicilian sacrifice. Knight takes e6. Although in this case it's not really about the knight sacrifice per se. The point is that if the knight is taken, then the queen lands on d8 with check, and after king to f7, rook f1 check, and when the king hides on g8, queen takes bishop, and queen takes e6 check is next, and black is just dead lost there. If black instead goes for the casual bishop to e7, that also doesn't work out too great. This time the bishop gives itself up, and if black would take, then the knight comes in and threatens with knight c7 check, and black is also very unlikely to survive that one. Fischer did know what to do here. Bishop to b4. Now the knight is pinned and attacked twice, so rook to b3, queen to a5, and white castled, as did Fischer. And here it seems as though white was still really in the mood to sacrifice, because even though the black king reached safety, knight takes e6 was played anyway. Probably white was thinking black's development isn't amazing, almost all his pieces are far away on the queen side, but when you sacrifice a piece, you obviously need to be really sure your attack is decisive, because odds are you're simply losing if it's not. Now first of all, what's white's best move in this position? Queen to f2 is actually very good. It seems the knight on c3 is hanging now, but if black takes, now the sacrifice on e6 actually works. Black's best is now to just give some material back, because if pawn takes, it's a simple back rank checkmate after bishop takes check, king to h8, and after queen takes, knight takes, and rook takes f8, it's checkmate. Going back, white sacrificed in this position. Now let's see how this developed. Well, Fischer didn't think this was any good, he simply took that, and after bishop takes check, king to h8, white also traded on f8, and here white pinned his hopes on this move, queen to f4. White has a very straightforward plan, go queen to f7 and queen g8 checkmate. Somewhat surprisingly though, Fischer didn't seem to be in a hurry. Knight to c6, he just developed his second knight. And after queen to f7, threatening mate, Fischer still had everything under control. First, queen c5 check, and after king to h1, the saving move, knight to f6. Now not only does the knight guard the checkmating square, the queen on c5 also protects the bishop on f8, so there's no queen takes f8 either. And to top it off, the bishop on c8 now also targets white's attacking bishop on e6, and it's clear that white's attack is over. If white takes the knight to bring back the checkmate threat, then simply bishop takes bishop, no checkmate anymore, and after queen takes bishop, white even loses a piece. In the game, white just traded his bishop off, basically admitting his attack amounted to nothing, but Fischer didn't even recapture, he simply took a pawn on e5, also attacking the queen, and after the retreat, queen to e6, knight from e to g4 was played, and Tringov simply resigned. Now why did he resign? Black has a checkmate threat himself now. Now just to illustrate, let's say it's black's turn, then there would be knight f2 check, king to g1, knight h3 double check, and after king to h1, queen g1 is mate. So let's say white goes bishop to h4 to guard f2, then black can simply take the bishop on c8 and black is a piece up. So not your typical Najdorf counterattack, but this is what happens when you go for an unsound sacrifice against someone who knows the opening inside and out from both sides. Sacrificing a knight on e6 is very typical in the Sicilian, but you just have to be so sure before you go into that. I'm not sure what white missed, maybe he missed the knight maneuver to f6, maybe the queen check on c5. Who knows, I hope you enjoyed the game anyway. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing, I'd be very grateful. More great games are coming up. I'll see you guys again soon, and take care.